Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. FPL Consult here, and in today's video I'm going to share with you guys a double game week 35 wildcard that I've put together for those of you who are wildcarding this week. So there's lots of things to consider because it is the tail end of the season. There are a couple of double game weeks left now in game week 35 as well as later on in double game week 37 as well. So a lot of things to consider. We will touch on the things that I think are important when you are building your wildcard here in this graphic, and in the next section we will display my Game Week 35 wildcard that I've put together that hopefully would take you guys through for the rest of the season. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you do, please drop a like and also subscribe as well if you are new around here. We are trying to hit 7.5k subscribers by the end of the season, so if you're watching and you aren't subscribed yet, please do subscribe and help the channel to get there before the end of the season. Alright, so let's cover this graphic here, and I've put together a couple of things that as I was building the Game Week 35 wildcard, it came through my mind and I thought I'd share with you guys my thoughts on these points. So the first thing is starting with a bench boost 37 team in mind. Now the reason why I think this is important is because double Game Week 37 is a much bigger double game week than double Game Week 35. Of course, a lot of us will still have our bench boost chip, and that is part of our chip strategy. So obviously you would have to look at your team in Game Week 37, look at what you ideally want, and then work backwards from there. I think that is how to go ahead building the double Game Week 35 wildcard. Now for those of you guys who don't have the bench boost left, I think it is still important to have a look at potentially what you would want to be with or the team that you want to set out with in Game Week 37, and then work backwards from there, because there's only a couple of game weeks left, and this kind of method of building the wildcard will ensure that when you get to Game Week 37 you'll be able to cover all the players that you want. So the next point is talking about the teams with the most fixtures for the rest of the season. So Chelsea and Tottenham obviously have the most fixtures from now in Game Week 35 all the way till the rest of the season. They double now in 35, single game week in 36 for them, and then they double again in 37 before the last single game week of the season in Game Week 38. So basically they have loads of fixtures left. 2 double game weeks and 2 single game weeks, so it's a 6 fixture span across the last 4 game weeks. Now we would be wanting to at least at least double up on them. I think a lot of people would be looking to triple up on them. So the thing that I will consider here is how you would double or triple up on these assets from Chelsea and Tottenham, because their defense has been pretty leaky, but the fixtures are there for some of these teams. Like Tottenham's double game week is really tough, but I think looking at Chelsea's one is decent from a defensive standpoint. Maybe in that sense you go for double Chelsea defense and a single attack, because most of their attackers don't really excite me other than Cole Palmer for Chelsea, right? And then for Tottenham, they're slightly better in attack, but their defense has not been solid at all. So maybe you go for double attack for Spurs as well as one defender there. So I think these are things you have to look at, considering that you want triple Chelsea and triple Tottenham, right? For those of you guys going double Chelsea or double Tottenham, I think that is also something that can be considered because of the next point. Now the next point is looking at where or which are the places that you would be willing to compromise on, because I think when you're on a Game Week 35 wildcard, a lot of us would be flocking to the doublers, people or teams who double in 37. But that also means that we will be foregoing Arsenal and Liverpool assets. Maybe Liverpool at this point in time may not be that popular, but I think Arsenal assets, particularly Arsenal defenders, are very high in demand right now because of how consistent they are. Again, they kept a clean sheet against Wolves, so that's loads of clean sheets kept recently. Obviously before that they conceded against Aston Villa, but in general across the whole of the season they have been the best defense so far. So I think for those of you guys who don't really want to compromise on Arsenal defenders and still want to have someone like a Gabriel, like a Saliba, or even Raya as your keeper, by all means, I think that is a decent consideration. And thereafter, if they take up a slot, then that would mean that maybe you can't double or triple up on Chelsea or Tottenham, right? So that's why I think all these things come into play together, and having a look at what you think is the best combination would be helpful, right, when you are building a double game week 35 wildcard. Now the second last point is talking about Manchester United, Newcastle, and Man City. I'm focusing here on the 2, single game week fixtures for all these teams in 35 and 36 before they double in 37. The reason why I've kind of called these teams out is because I think the double game week in Game Week 37 for Manchester United is not that great at all. It's Arsenal and Newcastle. Even though they're both at home, those are very difficult fixtures for Manchester United. But I think the reason why we still should consider some United assets on the double Game Week 35 wildcard at least is because they have one of the best single game week fixtures in 35 as well as 36. Right, so I think you will have to have some of these assets in your team. And then same goes for Newcastle as well, but I think that's a bit less of a concern because most of us would want to be tripled up on Newcastle already. Same for City as well. The last pointer here that I have is that triple Man City is non-negotiable. I would definitely have triple Man City. And in fact, a bit of a spoiler, but I think the best way to kind of tackle the triple City situation is one defender, one midfielder, and one attacker to cover all bases as well. But in general, these are the things that I would consider, or I did consider, while building the double Game Week 35 wildcard. A good starting point, again, as I've mentioned, is to just think about all these things before or even while you're building your wildcard so that you ensure that you cover all the bases. And a last caveat I would say before we jump into the draft is that you have to take into account the edge that you want over non-wildcarders, because while you are wildcarding now in double Game Week 35, you still want to gain an edge over those who aren't wildcarding. And the places that I guess you can go different and maybe non-wildcarders wouldn't have, right, is losing your Arsenal and Liverpool assets, which I guess some people, again, may not be very comfortable with. But I just thought about it as I was building the wildcard, and I think the main advantage of this double Game Week 35 wildcard, on top of setting you up for the bench boost in 37, is allowing you to lose your Arsenal and Liverpool assets, which the non-wildcarders would have in their non-wildcarded teams. So that I would think is the major difference. If you don't really want to sacrifice these assets, then by all means include them. But that probably means that you wouldn't have too different of a team as compared to non-wildcarders. So I think that's worth considering while you're building the wildcard. Right, so enough said, enough rambling. Let's have a look at the double Game Week 35 wildcard that I've put together for you guys. So this is where I'm at with a double Game Week 35 wildcard draft. Again, this is very early in the game week for Game Week 35. I've recorded this just before the Sunday game, so basically I haven't watched any games on Sunday. If any of these players get injured, of course you don't include them in your draft, but I think the structure that I would go for is something that looks like this. So let's analyze the draft on a whole first before I go into the individual players, and you will realize that there are mainly 5 teams here and I'm tripled up on all these 5 teams. Now all these 5 teams again are the ones who double in Game Week 37, so you would definitely have a team of 15 doublers in Game Week 37 ready to be bench boosted. And of course, leading up to Game Week 37, if you want to switch around a couple of double Game Week players that maybe you prefer later on, because we will get information here and there as the game weeks go along, and maybe you prefer another player instead of the ones that you have already, there is wiggle room in this draft because it is only 102 million, so there's money left in the bank. I'm sure you guys will have some of that, and also you will have 2 free transfers from Game Week 36 as well as 37. So basically there's wiggle room and you will be able to kind of tweak some players that you want. But this is where I'm at. So triple Manchester United, triple Chelsea, triple Spurs, triple Newcastle, and triple Man City. I think this generally would form the structure of the draft. The main reason why I think I wouldn't have many Brighton assets is firstly because they are a bit of a risk. Let's say you go for João Pedro up front. He is quite risky. Maybe he could be benched for a couple of games if they come in quick succession because he's just come back from injury. And then with the goalkeeper situation, you don't really know who's going to play. And then in defense, they do concede quite a number of goals, Brighton. And their fixtures don't really scream a lot of clean sheets. So that is why I've omitted Brighton. But I've pretty much gone for every other team that doubles in Game Week 37. So let's talk about the keepers first. So I've gone for Onana and Petrovic. Now, previously, earlier on, maybe Game Week 32, Game Week 33, when I was looking at a keeper combination for Game Week 35, I actually had Onana as well as Dubravka penciled in. But I think right now I'm favoring the Onana and Petrovic combination a little bit more, just because I have space for Fabian Schär, whose attacking threat is really good in the defense that I have here. He's part of my defensive 5 here. So I think I definitely prefer Fabian Schär in the team for his attacking threat, and therefore that gives me space to kind of remove the Bravka from my keeper combination, and I've gone for Petrovic here in goal. So I guess something to touch on about these keepers is that I've gone double Manchester United defense as well as double Chelsea defense here. So again, I was talking about this in the previous section, where the way that we triple up on each team has to be considered. So I think it's not ideal that I'm doubled up on Manchester United defense, because their double game week in 37 is really not ideal. It's Arsenal and Newcastle. But again, as I mentioned, the 35 fixture is really good, as well as the 36 fixture. So I think leading up to for these 2 game weeks, leading up to the double, it's fine to have Onana and Dalot, but come game week 37, maybe you could switch around and you don't have to go double Manchester United defense. Like, it's not necessary, but I've just have them in here just to get the team ready for the bench boost. I mean, 35 good fixtures, 36 good fixtures, and then you can remove them in 37 if you don't want them for the double game week in 37. So that's for Manchester United. For Chelsea, I'm perfectly fine with having double Chelsea defense for the rest of the season with Petrovic here and Gusto. I think Gusto's attacking threat is really good. Chelsea of late defensively have looked pretty good. I think their numbers have seen a bit of an uptick, and I think their performances, yes, they lost against Man City, but I think the performances have been pretty decent, at least in the defensive standpoint. Attackingly, I think they're very, very poor. So really, I only have Cole Palmer in the midfield as an attacker for Chelsea. I've omitted Nicholas Jackson from the draft, and I guess that also kind of tells you what I think as a Chelsea fan about Nicholas Jackson. I'm just not confident he's clinical enough. You could disagree with me. You could go for Jackson in place of Højlund. That's fine as well. But for this draft, I've gone with double Chelsea defense, Petrovic and Gusto, as well as Palmer in the midfield as the third Chelsea player. Now, just to touch on the defense before we move on to the midfield, the players that I haven't covered is Vardiol and Romero, right? Because Fabian Schär, I've already talked about him just now. I like his attacking threat. For Gusto and Dalot, they make up the double up of Chelsea and Manchester United defense. So for Vardiol and Romero, talking about Vardiol first, as I've mentioned, the triple up on Man City is absolutely crucial, and I want to kind of diversify it a little bit. I don't want to go too heavy on the attack for Man City, because that also means that I would be taking up slots from other players from other teams, like maybe Gordon, Maddison, Son. I would give up on someone there just to fit an extra City attacker. So that's why I think the best way is to just have one defender, one midfielder, and then Erling Haaland, of course. Now, I think something that I want to mention as well is that it's perfectly viable for you to want to go for Kevin De Bruyne, right? But that obviously would mean you probably lose a City defender, because I think Haaland and Foden is pretty much locked in every Gameweek 35 wildcard. So if you fit Kevin De Bruyne in, you basically don't have City defense, which isn't the end of the world, because City always seem to concede one goal, whatever the opposition is. So I think that is also a viable play. But for this draft, I've gone for a bit more of a balance. So I have Vardiol, Foden and Haaland as the Man City triple up. And then for Romero, the reason why I've gone with him, I mean, I definitely prefer Pedro Porro, but he seems to be nursing a bit of an injury right now. If after recording, he seems to be, fine, perfectly fine, and playing in game week 30, they blank in game week 34, right? So you don't really have a look in, but if the news is good, from Ange Postecoglou, then obviously I prefer Porro to Romero, but for now I've gone for Romero here. His attacking threat is pretty decent. From corners as well, he scored a couple of goals, so I think he's probably the next best to go for. If you are somehow struggling with money, I think there are a couple of enablers that have come up because of Udogi's injury. He just went for surgery, posted on social media that he'll be out for the rest of the season. So I think if you want to go slightly cheaper, there are some enablers that have come up. I think Ben Davies or even Emerson Royale would come in place of Udogi, and thereafter, we could see some differentials if you want to go for those players. But I think I would go for Romero here because budget really isn't much of a concern. Now in midfield, I have Madison, Foden, Gordon, Son, and Palmer. So already talking about Foden and Palmer just now, I've covered them. I pretty much think that every draft should at least have Foden, Son, and Palmer locked in. Son and Palmer because they have the most fixtures and they are the talisman for their teams. They're both on penalties as well. For Foden, he's just Foden. He's on super good form right now. I would definitely have him as part of the City triple up. And then it's Gordon and Madison. So let's talk about Madison first. And the reason why I've gone for Madison here, instead of maybe someone like Bruno Fernandes, who is also in some Gameweek 35 wildcard drafts that I've seen, is I think James Madison could be a very good differential to have on a Gameweek 35 wildcard. Like, we know how threatening he is from set pieces, from open play. He's very, very creative as well. Spurs are fighting for the top 4 places, so definitely Madison is going to be an integral part of that. And again, I think having the most fixtures kind of does it for me. I still have coverage of the Manchester United attack in Rasmus Højlund, who's up front, who I'll cover later on. But I think it's not the end of the world going without Bruno Fernandes and just having Højlund up front. It's not like Bruno Fernandes has been tearing it up this whole season. I think recently he's picked up a couple of goals, a couple of assists, but I don't think he's in that double-digit haul category that he used to be as well. So I think covering the Manchester United attack with this Højlund up front is fine for me. That's why I've preferred the doubled up in attack for Spurs. Because again, as I've mentioned, I don't really like Spurs fixtures from a defensive standpoint. So I much prefer having Madison and Son as a double Spurs attack compared to maybe having, I lost the keeper's name, Vicario. Instead of having Vicario as a keeper and then maybe Romero or Porro as the defender, that would make me doubled up on the Spurs defense and then have Son up as the attacker. I don't really like that combination. I prefer to have just one defender. I've chosen Romero here and then 2 Spurs attackers, Madison and Son. Right, last up in midfield is Anthony Gordon. I think Gordon is a pretty much... He was one of the first few names in my wildcard for Gameweek 35. Just because of the link-up play between Isak, it looks really good. Newcastle are finding a bit of form recently as well. Massive win against Spurs the last game week. So I think Newcastle are looking really sharp. And the Gordon-Isak combination that has worked really well these past few game weeks, I've gone for it in this draft as well. So up front, just to cover the 3 strikers that we have, I don't think we need to talk much about Erling Haaland. The only thing I would say is that currently he is yellow flagged. He was not even in the squad for the FA Cup against Chelsea. Man City got through, but Haaland was not in the squad. We need another update. But I guess that does not impact the inclusion of him in the Gameweek 35 wildcard too much, because come Gameweek 37, which will be quite a while away, I think we would still want Haaland by then. So the hope is just to have him in 35 here as your wildcard, in your wildcard, and then hopefully he recovers by the time 37 comes around. Right, and then there's Højlund and Isak. Now for Isak, as I mentioned just now, Newcastle, they doubled in 37, and I think attackingly they look really, really good. So going for the double up in attack here of Gordon and Isak, I really like it. So the only player I haven't talked about is Rasmus Højlund. So I think the thinking behind having Rasmus Højlund in this draft instead of someone like Bruno Fernandes is just because I really like to have at least one very big differential in my team, either on a wild card or even on a free hit. So in general, when I build my drafts, I like to spice it up a little bit, and Rasmus Højlund for me is the one that I've gone for here instead of Bruno Fernandes. I think it's perfectly viable that even Bruno Fernandes is a bit of a differential. But I've gone for Rasmus Højlund here to cover the Manchester United attack, who I think will do pretty well from Gameweek 35 as well as Gameweek 36 because of the good fixtures. In 37, they play Arsenal, they play Newcastle. If you don't really want Rasmus Højlund, you could even go for João Pedro, who doubles in 37 and has decent fixtures in 37, just tough fixtures in 35 and 36, and that's why I haven't included João Pedro. Right, but he's on the radar as well. And maybe if you do that, you can upgrade, let's say, James Madison to Bruno Fernandes if you want to. So there's loads of ways that you can permutate this draft. Letting go of one spot for a particular team would just mean that you can, double up in defense instead of attack, that kind of situation. So I think the teams we would be going for in a Gameweek 35 wildcard are generally the same. You're going to be largely looking at teams who double in 37. but the permutations would really come in how we triple up on these teams, whether you go double defense, double attack, even triple attack is also a possibility as well. And then, as I mentioned in previous section, do you want to have some Arsenal players, some Liverpool players, and you can add them in if you want to as well. But this is where I'm at with a Gameweek 35 wildcard. Hopefully it was comprehensive enough as to why I went for some of these players. There will also be an updated Gameweek 35 wildcard that I will upload later on this week after we get some team news. It would likely be after the double Gameweek 34 fixtures are over, and potentially after some press conference news as well. But we'll wait for then to give an updated wildcard. But at least for now, until I upload the next video, this is where I'm at, and hopefully it gives you guys a starting point for a Gameweek 35 wildcard. But if not, thank you guys for watching so much. If you are on a Gameweek 35 wildcard, let me know how your team looks like, what changes you would make to this draft, and have I missed out any jarring players that I should be including in the draft as well. If not, thank you for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. We are trying to hit 7.5k subscribers. If we can get there by the end of the season, that would be an absolute dream. But if not, I will catch you guys in more Gameweek 35 content coming very soon. Bye bye.